Christina has no, she texted me earlier. She has no electricity and all that because of the storms and everything. So I guess this is everybody who's going to be here tonight. That is fun. No, stop asking me these things.
Didn't get a chance to
Okay. Huh?
I didn't even get a chance to ask anything yet.
Okay. So, the Mythos class. We are going to be going over the Norse and Scandinavian equivalents for things like vampires, werewolves, zombies, stuff like that. There is a huge array of these creatures, so tonight we are only going to cover a few of them. And I am going to let you pick which one we do first. Tonight we are going to be covering trolls, not Mara, which are werewolves, and Draugr, which are zombies and vampires. So which would you guys like to go over first?
Doggers.
Sounds good.
The zombies and vampires. Okay.
We do
No
tend to
problem.
be conversations, so it seems fitting.
Okay. Okay. So they're called Draugr or Draugr, really. And they are actually both what are considered zombies and vampires. The Draugr or Draugr are also called, I'm going to butcher a lot of words tonight, so bear with me. Aptraganga or Aptraganger, literally meaning again walker. They are an undead creature. They can die a second death when their bodies decay, are burned, dismembered, or otherwise destroyed. However, some Draugr are immune to weapons, and only a hero can destroy them. In legends, the hero would often have to wrestle the Draugr back to his grave, thereby defeating him, since weapons would do no good. A good example of this kind of fight is found in one of the sagas called the Romandar. Although iron could injure a Draugr, as is the case with many supernatural creatures, it would not be sufficient to stop it. Sometimes the hero is required to dispose of the body in unconventional ways. The preferred method, sorry, you'll probably hear my roommate, the preferred method is to cut off the Draugr's head, burn the body, and dump the ashes in the sea. A bit of an overkill, but the emphasis is being on making absolutely sure that the Draugr was dead and gone. Draugr live in their graves, often guarding treasure buried with them in their burial mound. The resting place of the Draugr was a tomb that served much as a workable home for the creature. Draugr are able to leave this dwelling place and visit the living during the night. But such visits are supposed to be universally horrible events that often end in death for one or more of the living. They are animated corpses. Unlike ghosts, they have a corporeal body with similar physical abilities as in life. Older literature makes clear distinctions between sea Draugr and land Draugr, and sometimes the sea Draugr are also considered trolls because of the way that they do things, because they'll like entice children to come to them so they can drown them. Draugr possess superhuman strength. They can increase their size at will, and they carry unmistakable stench of decay. The appearance of a Draugr was that of a dead body, swollen, blackened, and generally hideous to look at. They also appear to retain some semblance of intelligence, which is, from all of the type of zombie stuff that's out there, that's usually a very rare thing. They're aware, and they sometimes can be known to talk to other people, and that's more of where like the vampire part of it comes in. The Draugr were said to be either death blue or conversely corpse pale, so one or the other. The death blue color was not actually gray, but was a dark blue or a maroon hue that covered the entire body. Glamour, the undead shepherd of the Grettis saga, was reported to be dark blue in color. And in Laxadela saga, the bones of a dead sorceress who had appeared in dreams were dug up and found to be blue and evil looking. They exist either to guard their treasure or wreak havoc on living beings or torment those who have wronged them in their life. The motivation of the actions of a Draugr was primarily jealousy and greed. The greed of a Draugr causes it to viciously attack any would-be grave robbers, but the Draugr also expresses an innate jealousy of the living, stemming from a longing for the things of the life it once had. The Draugr's ability to increase its size also increased its weight, and the body of the Draugr was described as being extremely heavy. They are also noted for the ability to rise from the grave as wisp of smoke and swim through solid rock, which would be useful as a means of exiting the graves. And what they mean by swim is kind of like, if there's a ghost and it just kind of like floats through a wall as a mist. In folklore, Draugr slay their victims through various methods, including crushing them with their enlarged forms, devouring their flesh, devouring them whole in their enlarged forms, indirectly killing them by driving them mad, and by drinking their blood. Animals feeding near the grave of a Draugr may be driven mad by the creature's influence. They may also die from being driven mad. Draugr are also noted as being able to drive living people insane. The Draugr's victims were not limited to trespassers in its home. The roaming undead decimated livestock by running the animals to death while either riding them or pursuing them in some hideous, half-flayed form. Shepherds whose duties to their flocks left them out of doors at nighttime were also particular targets for the hunger and the hatred of the undead. Draugr are noted for having numerous magical abilities, referred to as troll's cat, resembling those of living witches and wizards, such as such as shape-shifting, controlling the weather, and seeing into the future. Among the creatures that a Draugr may turn into are a seal, a great flayed bull, a gray horse with a broken back but no ears or tail, and a cat that would sit on a sleeper's chest and grow steadily heavier until the victim suffocated. The part about the cats may come from cats sensing death and will lie on a person's chest as comfort. And something I wanted to go over with this is, back then, people often associated cats by doing that as being evil creatures and actually killing the person. And the thing is it's noted that cats, as this is something I talked about last night, cats kind of walk between the veil, and they can sense when people are sick or about to die. And there's a good example of this. Not too long ago, a few years back, there was a nursing home that had a cat that lived there. And every night, the cat would sleep in someone's room. And if that cat ever slept in that person's room, that person would die. And they kind of saw it as an omen. So basically, if that cat came and go sleep in your room that night, you were going to die. So, but they weren't really worried about it. They just saw it as a way of who to watch out for. So this may have been why Draugrs could have been considered a cat as well, because if a cat is sleeping on someone to comfort them and the person ends up dead, back then you're going to associate that with being a bad thing, obviously. Draugr have the ability to enter into the dreams of the living, but it generally happens even so that they leave beside the living person some type of gift by which, on awakening, the living person may be assured of the tangible nature of the visit, meaning basically, they would constantly visit somebody and they'd always leave a special gift behind them. Not always a good thing. It could have been something creepy. You never know. Draugr also have the ability to curse a victim, as shown in the Grettir saga, where Grettir is cursed to be unable to become any stronger. Draugr also brought disease to a village and can create a temporary darkness in daylight hours. While the Draugr certainly preferred to be active during the night, it did not appear to be vulnerable to sunlight like some other revenants. After a person's death, the main indication that the person will become a Draugr is that the corpse is not in a horizontal position. In most cases, the corpse is found in an upright or sitting position, and this is an indication that the dead might return. Any mean, nasty, or greedy person can become a Draugr. Basically, you have to have those traits. Draugr can also come about through infection by another Draugr, such as the story of Glamour. When Glamour arrives in the Haunted Valley in the Grettir saga, the previous evil spirits are relegated to the sidelines, and when Glamour is found dead, they disappear, whereas he takes over their role as Ghost of the Valley. Although Glamour is arguably a marginal character to begin with, it is only after his fight with the first malignant spirit that the first spirit leaves the valley and Glamour takes its place, wreaking havoc. Similarly, in Begia saga, a shepherd is killed by a Draugr and rises the next night as one himself. I'm sorry.
Deep breaths. You're doing great.
Yeah, man.
Oh, my.
You're doing great.
Traditionally, a pair of open iron scissors were placed on the chest of a recently deceased person, and straws or twigs might be hidden among their clothes. The big toes were tied together, or needles were driven through the soles of the feet in order to keep the dead from being able to walk. Tradition also held that the coffin would be lifted and lowered in 3 different directions as it was carried from the house to confuse a possible Draugr and their sense of direction. The most effective means of preventing the return of the dead was believed to be the corpse door. It's a special door that was built through which the corpse was carried feet first, with people surrounding it so the corpse couldn't see where it was going. The door was then bricked up to prevent it from returning. It is speculated that this belief began in Denmark and spread throughout the Norse culture. The belief was founded on the idea that the dead could only leave through the way they entered. The Begia saga, the Draugr infesting the home of the Icelander Kjartan were driven off by holding a door doom. One by one, the Draugr were summoned to the door doom and given judgment and were forced out of the home by this legal method. The home was then purified with holy water to ensure they never came back, which is obviously, a Christian concept that they implemented. A variation of the Draugr is the Hogboy. The Hogboy, which means borrow or tumulus, was a mound dweller, the dead body living on within its tomb, basically. The notable difference between the two was that the Hogboy is unable to leave its gravesite and only attacks those that trespass on its territory. The Hogboy was rarely found far from its burial place and is a type of undead commonly found in Norse saga material. The creature is said to either swim alongside boats or sail around them in a partially submerged vessel, always on their own. In some accounts, witnesses portray them as shapeshifters who take on the appearance of seaweed or moss-covered stones on the shoreline. The words dragon and Draugr are not linguistically related. However, both the serpent and the spirit serve as jealous guardians of the graves of kings or ancient civilizations. Dragons that act as Draugr appear in Beowulf as well as in some of the heroic lays of the Poetic Edda. There is, folklore about them. And one of the best known Draugr is, as I talked about before, Glamour, who is defeated by the hero in the Greta saga. After Glamour dies on Christmas Eve, people become aware that Glamour was not resting in peace. He wrought such havoc that some people fainted at the sight of him, while others went out of their minds. After a mundane battle, Grettir eventually gets Glamour on his back. Just because Grettir kills him, Glamour curses Grettir because Glamour was endowed with more evil force than most other ghosts, and thus he was able to speak and leave Grettir with his curse after his death. A somewhat ambivalent alternative view of the Draugr is presented by the example of Gunnar in the Njal saga. It seemed as though the How was agape, and then Gunnar had turned within the How to look upwards at the moon. They thought that they saw 4 lights within the How, but not a shadow to be seen. Then they saw that Gunnar was merry with a joyful face. In the Begia saga, a shepherd is assaulted with a blue-black Draugr. The shepherd's neck is broken during the ensuing scuffle, and the shepherd rises the next night as a Draugr. In more recent Scandinavian folklore, the Draug, which is the more modern spelling used in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, is often identified with the spirits of mariners who have drowned at sea. The creature is said to possess a distinctly human form, with the exception that its head is composed entirely of seaweed, like I talked about before. In other tellings, the Draugr is described as being a headless fisherman, dressed in oilskin and sailing in half a boat. This trait is common in the northernmost part of Norway, where life and culture was based on fishing more than anywhere else. The reason for this may be that the fishermen often drowned in great numbers, and the stories of restless dead coming in from sea were more common up north than anywhere else in the country. A recorded legend from Trondelag tells how a cadaver lying on a beach became the object of a quarrel between the two types of drogger, headless and seaweed-headed. A similar source even tells of a third type, the glape, known to hitch themselves to sailors walking ashore and make them slip on the wet rocks. Just, gotta be an asshole. But though the drogger usually presages death, there is an amusing account in northern Norway of a northerner who managed to outwit him. It was Christmas Eve, and Ola went down to his boathouse to get the keg of brandy he had bought for the holidays. When he got in, he noticed a drogger sitting on the keg, staring out to sea. Ola, with great presence of mind and great bravery, tiptoed up behind the drogger and struck him sharply in the small of the back so that he went flying out through the window, with sparks hissing around him as he hit the water. Ola knew he had no time to lose, so he set off at a great rate, running through the churchyard which lay between his home and the boathouse. As he ran, he cried, "Up, all you Christian souls, and help me." Then he heard the sound of fighting between the ghost and the drogger, who were battling each other with coffin boards and bunches of seaweed. The next morning when people came to church, the whole yard was strewn with coffin covers, boat boards, and seaweed. After the fight, which the ghost won, the drogger never came back to that district. Does anybody have any questions about that so far?
Not so far. I'm going to ask how people become drugger, but I think you kind of covered that. They have to be grumpy douchebags, so
yeah, they have to be really mean and malicious and basically not kind-hearted people. So basically, if you had a family member that you knew to basically be an asshole, they would go about, sewing their toes together and sticking spikes and stuff in the bottom of their feet.
That should be my entire family.
I'd say that sounds rather entertaining. It's like, yeah, that guy was kind of a jerk, so let's screw him over again.
Yes. Or a reason
Most
to, you mean to someone you didn't like.
Uh-oh.
Did anybody have anything you wanted to say or anything that they found interesting about it?
Most of the stories that you told seem to be well into the Christian period. When did the stories about the drogger actually first come out, or do you know?
Well, there are quite a bit of them in the sagas. It just depends on when those sagas were written. But you'd have to look and see which one was the oldest.
Okay, I was just curious if you had an idea.
I know I wasn't really able to find anything about when they first came about. I did look for that, but I wasn't able to find it.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Hold on a second.
Maybe because one of those things, like a lot of stuff in writing didn't really happen until after Christianization and stuff, so maybe that's where they're getting that influence by. Could be another one of those situations, kind of like the Eddas in general.
Well, the stories about the most famous ones were both Christianized, so I had spaced some of the earlier talk and gotten confused there, but I was just curious how old they were.
Hey, that's something I can try to look up, but I don't know off the top of my head at the moment.
No big deal. I can look it up myself.
Trying to think. Would you like to go over the werewolves or the trolls next?
Werewolves.
I would say trolls. Now we need a tiebreaker.
Jen says werewolves.
Okay.
Jen says werewolves, and I'm with Josh on trolls. So werewolves are leading.
Okay.
Are we tied? I don't know what we're.
Well, sorry, give me just a minute.
60 seconds standby. Why don't you shake your head to that, Trevor? I seen it.
So the werewolves won't take as long as the trolls, because the trolls is actually going to take a good bit, because I found like a shit ton of information on them. So we'll go ahead and do the werewolves really quickly.
Sounds good. You win this round, Amy. And Jen, I guess.
Okay. So werewolves are called Natmara. In Scandinavia, there existed a famous race of she-werewolves known with the name Natmara. The Mara, or Natmara, it literally means nightmare. They appear as a skinny young woman dressed in a nightgown with pale skin and long black hair and nails. They can turn into sand and slip through the slightest crack in the wood of a wall and terrorize the sleeping by riding on their chest, thus giving them nightmares. This kind of behavior actually is similar to succubi, who are also said to sit on the chest of sleeping people, causing sleep paralysis. So that's probably where this comes from. They would sometimes ride cattle that, when touched by the Mara, would have their hair or fur tangled and their energy drained, while trees would curl up and wilt. And in some tales, they had a similar role to the banshee as an omen of death, and if one were to leave a dirty doll in a family living room, one of the members would soon fall ill and die of tuberculosis, also called lung soot. And this came about referring to how the lack of proper chimneys in old 18th and 19th century homes led to many contracting aforementioned disease due to inhaling smoke on a daily basis. There is controversy as to how they came into being, and in some tales, the Maras are simply restless children whose souls leave their body at night to haunt the living. If a woman were to have a horse placenta pulled over her head before giving birth, the children will be delivered safely, but all the boys will turn into werewolves and all the girls will become Maras. Another version is the Mara is a race of Nordic peasant women who participated in an ancient ceremony that would prevent them from feeling pain during childbirth. As a result of this ritual, however, the Mara would slowly transform every midnight into a terrifying wolf monster, a process that was slow and brought agony to the Mara as her body contorted, her teeth lengthened, and her nails sharpened. As a lasting legacy, the children of the Mara would also be affected, with her daughters inheriting the she-werewolf curse, but her sons becoming shamans, or also the sons could become berserkers who took on the wolf form. To avoid being haunted by a Mara, a man can place his shoes at the front of the bed, as it is from there that the Mara climbs up, and seeing as something is in the way, it will deter her. Or you can nail a horseshoe over the bed. But that is all that I have on the werewolves. Anybody have any questions about that?
No.
Okay. Then we will get into the trolls, because the trolls are quite a bit of info. Let's see. Okay. Trolls. Trolls dwell in isolated rocks, mountains, or caves, and they live together in small family units and are rarely helpful to human beings. Hold on. Okay. And the way that they live is usually as father and daughter or mother and son, oddly. In olden times, trolls lived just about everywhere in the Scandinavian countries. They believed that they owned the lakes, fields, forests, and bridges where they lived. This always caused a great deal of misunderstanding, as the farmers and townsfolk also believed that they owned these places. Trolls were also apt to make their homes under tree roots and in caves in the mountains. They liked dark places because the sunlight hurt their eyes, and some people even said that trolls venturing into sunlight would be turned into stone. Later in Scandinavian folklore, trolls became beings in their own right, where they live far from human habitation. They're not Christianized and are considered dangerous to human beings. Depending on the region from which accounts of trolls stem, their appearance varies greatly. Trolls may be ugly and slow-witted, or look and behave exactly like human beings with no particularly grotesque characteristic about them. But they live far away from human habitation and generally have some form of social organization. Later in Scandinavian folklore, trolls became defined as a particular type of being. Numerous tales are recorded about trolls in which they are frequently described as being extremely old, very strong, but slow and dim-witted, and are at times described as man-eaters. Their appearance is usually on the sloppy side, with bits and pieces of like last week's food stuck in their stringy hair and clothes. Their ears are mostly large and floppy and dirty enough to grow rutabagas in, as everything wants to say about them, always rutabagas. They're also not too careful about brushing their teeth, which is not very obvious as they do not smile that much. They are also ugly and sloppy in their behavior, which is of more importance than their appearance. The personality of most trolls is hindered not only by their meanness and stubbornness, but also in that they are slow thinking. They are apt to be noisy and quarrelsome, and at dinner, they untidily throw the bones over their shoulders so that their floors are always a bit cluttered. Not all trolls are disagreeable and mean. Some live around people and manage to get along very well. But this actually is where the idea of an internet troll comes from. Most troll parents were happy with their ugly baby trolls, but occasionally they would take a fancy to a mortal baby. When this happened, they would exchange their own beady-eyed baby and take the other child for their own. Sometimes mortal parents were surprised to find the behavior of their child change greatly for the worse, and it would be a good guess that their child had been exchanged secretly for a nasty troll child. Sometimes the troll parents would find the stolen child to be too good-natured and happy, and they would grow tired of seeing a smiling, cheerful face. So they would grow lonesome for their own mean, spiteful troll child and would return to the family to retrieve their baby again. Sometimes, though, the stolen mortal child was just as awful as their own and lived very happily with the troll family. When this happened, the real troll child would grow up and marry a mortal and teach its family to be nasty, ugly, troll-like people. No one liked these people who looked like people but acted like ugly little trolls. To this day in Scandinavia, you see many statues and pictures of trolls, so there still must be plenty of them living in the northern countries. Therefore, trolls were in the end dangerous, regardless of how well they might get along with Christian society, and trolls display a habit of kidnapping and overrunning a farm or estate. The word troll remains uncertain, yet in later Swedish folklore is defined as nature beings and as all-purpose otherworldly beings, which is equivalent, for example, to like fairies in the Anglo-Celtic traditions. Additionally, the absence of trolls in regions of Scandinavia are described in folklore as being a consequence of the constant din of the church bells. This ring caused the trolls to leave for other lands, although not without some resistance, of course. Numerous traditions relate how trolls destroyed a church under construction or hurled boulders and stones at completed churches. Large local stones are sometimes described as the product of a troll's toss. Additionally, into the 20th century, the origins of particular Scandinavian landmarks, such as particular stones, are ascribed to trolls who may, for example, have turned to stone upon exposure to sunlight. Now we're going to get into the different kinds of trolls. The tomties are often confused with trolls as they look very similar, but the tomties have kinder faces. Once a long time ago, every farm in Scandinavia had a tomty. They lived in the barns as they loved farm animals. It was the custom to have a pan of milk or something good to eat in the barn for the Tomte, and in exchange, it would watch over the farm and keep foxes from stealing the farmer's hens. Their favorite treat was romagrote, which is a sort of like porridge and a pudding mixed together. Tomtes lived many hundreds of years and might be with a family through many generations. Some of the families who came to the United States brought their family Tomte with them and continued in the new land to put a saucer of milk in the barn for good luck. The Nissen is a troll who lived on the farm and brought good luck to kind farm people. At Yule time, the Scandinavian families called the troll Yule Nissen and would leave a bowl of romagrote in the barn so that the Nissen would give the farm animals good health for the coming year. This troll taught the lesson of kindness. Trolls are familiar to Americans in the story of the three billy goats Gruff, who encounter a bridge troll who does not want the goats to cross his bridge, and this troll signifies covetousness. The Jotnar in Scandinavian myths are usually ugly, often with like tusk or cycloptic eyes. They are much bigger and stronger than humans and are very dangerous and evil by disposition. The word Jotun is derived from the Scandinavian word for giant. So a female Jotun is called Gigjar. A Jotnar turn to stone when exposed to sunlight. So they typically live in caves and mountains, which they only leave after sunset. They hunt humans because trolls generally are very fond of human flesh. When they aren't hungry, they throw stones at people and destroy human villages located in the mountains. There are also some subtypes of Jotnar that live in the sea or forest. Then we have the human-like trolls, which are called Huldrefolk. This type of troll is much smaller than the Jotun troll, of course. So Huldrefolk are usually handsome and blonde, but are set apart from humans by their long tails. They often go about naked, in which case the tails are easily seen. However, they sometimes hide their tails under their clothing. Females of this species, called Huldras, ensnare human males through their lovely singing and beautiful appearance, much like a siren. Huldras then use the entranced men to do their bidding or simply keep them as mates or pets. These poor males can be held under a spell for many, many years. Upon release or escape, the males cannot remember what has happened and do not realize that time has passed. The next one is called Moomin trolls. Moomins are well known from some books written by Tove Jansson. They are white and round with large snouts that make Moomins resemble hippopotamuses. These creatures are in many ways the opposite of Jotnar and Huldrefolk. They are friendly, sweet, and carefree. A typical Moomin lives life fully and views the world with an air of wonderment. They find joy in simple pleasures such as collecting stones and shells, and a Moomin has a keen spirit of adventure and is somewhat a restless soul. Northern folklore has many more kinds of trolls, one for every unfavorable trait in the behavior of mortals. Many people will recognize themselves in the habits of these trolls. You have the Fossa Grimmen, or waterfall troll, that live under the waterfalls and play a violin. It was the custom for people to throw a present over the falls for the troll, and he would return the favor by visiting the person in his sleep and give him the gift of musical talent. And this troll signified ambition. The Tomte Gubbin is the dancing troll, and he was a pest. Like most trolls, he never washed, and his hair was in wild, tangled disarray. He would wait in the woods, and when a young girl would pass by, he would leap out and dance her around in circles until she was dizzy. He liked to be the center of attention, and so he signified vanity. The Risa Gubbin is the forest troll, and he was very disagreeable. He was the one who makes a person slip on a wet log or makes a branch break under a child who is climbing a tree. He also caused woodsmen to be careless with axes and people to be careless with fire. So obviously he signified carelessness. The Naken, which we'll talk about later because it's also considered a mermaid. is a lake and well troll, and they lived in lakes, ponds, and wells. They didn't like people to fish in their lake and would annoy them by taking their bait off the hook and by scaring the fish away. They like to pull people underwater and entice children into deep water and onto thin ice in the winter. So they signify treachery and disobedience. You have the Huldra. The lady troll liked to entice young men. She had a magic cap to make her appear a pretty young girl, except for her long tail, which she tied up under her skirt so it would not show. However, her heart was still that of a troll. If a young man would fall in love with her and marry her in church, her tail would fall off and not return. And this signified falseness and two-facedness. The Hogboken is a hill troll, and they live under hills and caves and like to go about at night scaring people by following them and peeking in windows. So they signify fear. The troll carrying was a troll woman who carried her head around under her arm and liked to be around people full of hatred and visited them in nightmares. And she signified bigotry and hatred. You have the gel troll, which are mountain trolls who were some of the biggest. They lived in mountains and caused avalanches and earthquakes by stamping their feet. They also had many heads, each uglier than the next. The Troby Trefote, or Toby Wooden Leg, was the meanest troll. He would sneak up behind people and kick them with his knobby wooden leg. When they turned around, he had disappeared only to kick them again when they were not watching. Toby traveled from barn to barn, staying only long enough to cause a lot of trouble. He would cause mischief by pulling the harnesses off the wall onto the floor, and he would let the animals out of the barn and kick over the milk pail when no one was looking. He never bothered kind or generous people, though, so he signified cruelty and maliciousness. The Vestley Thompson caused trouble with the farm animals by whispering in horses' ears, telling them to be disobedient. He would tell the hens not to lay eggs so that they would end up in the stew pot and give all the animals very bad advice. So he represented spite and bad counsel. The Tussle is the troll of family ills. They made people worry about nothing, started fights and arguments, and liked to see people gossip. If children were bickering, it was a sure sign that a tussle was around the house, so they signified malice and gossip. The Tusselotter were tiny trolls that hid in small, dirty places. They would come at night with little hammers and chisels and make a cave in a person's tooth if he was too lazy to brush his teeth. They also liked to live in snarly hair and to make bread and milk spoil, so they represented uncleanliness and illness. And the last one is the Langinesen, or long nose. They had a very long nose and were forever putting it where it did not belong. They had big ears and liked to pry into people's affairs and hear gossip. They also wanted to poke around and be included in everything. This was a very familiar troll to most people. And of course, they signified morbid curiosity, snoopiness, and gossip. As far as the lore, a Scandinavian folk belief that lightning frightens away trolls and Jotnar appears in numerous Scandinavian folktales and may be a late reflection of the god Thor's role in fighting such beings. In connection, the lack of trolls and Jotnar in modern Scandinavia is sometimes explained as a result of the accuracy and efficiency of the lightning strikes. The prose Edda book, and I'm going to say this wrong, of course, is Skaldskar Parmal, describes an encounter between an unnamed troll woman and the 9th century skald Bragi. According to the section, Bragi was driving through a certain forest late one evening when a troll woman aggressively asked him who he was, in the process describing herself. And the translation is, "Trolls call me moon of dwelling, Bungnir, giant's wealth sucker, storm sun's bale, Cirrus's friendly companion, guardian of corpse fjord, swallower of heaven wheel. What is a troll other than that?" Askeladden, which translates to Ash Lad, is a central character in many Norwegian fairy tales. And here is the story of that. A farmer with 3 sons planned to cut wood in a forest he owned in order to pay off his debts. The oldest son went into the forest and encountered a troll. Frightened, the oldest son ran home. The second son went into the forest and was chased off by the troll as well. However, before the youngest son went into the forest, he asked his father for food. The father gave him a bit of cheese in a knapsack. When the youngest son went into the forest to cut the wood, the troll appeared just as it had for the previous brothers. When the troll threatened him, the boy pulled out the cheese. Do you see the stone? He asked the troll, and squeezed it until whey came out. When he threatened to deal with the troll as he had with the stone, the troll offered to help him with the wood cutting. The troll suggested that the boy come home with him for a tasty meal. Then he went to build up the fire and sent the boy for water, pointing to 2 buckets larger than the boy. The boy realized he could not carry the huge buckets. These buckets are too small, said the boy. I can fetch the spring instead. The troll, not wanting an entire spring which would put out the fire, decided to exchange chores. Why don't you tend the fire while I fetch the water, said the troll. The troll brought the water and proceeded to make porridge. When the porridge was finished, the boy suggested an eating match. The troll and the boy ate as much as they could. However, the boy had put his knapsack underneath his shirt and was pouring more porridge into the bag than into his mouth. When the bag was full, he cut a hole in it and continued to eat. The troll finally said he could eat no more. The boy, who was still going, suggested that the troll cut a hole in his stomach. He explained, then you can eat as much as you like. It doesn't hurt much. The troll did so and died, and the boy took his gold and silver and paid off the family debt. Peter Gynt is a play by Henrik Ibsen based on Norwegian legend. Per is the son of a prodigal farmer who frittered his fortune away. Per had the chance to be married to Ingrid, the daughter of the richest farmer of the land, but he wastes that opportunity as well. At Ingrid's wedding, Per kidnaps the young bride for the night and becomes an outlaw. He flees to the mountains where, after a night of heavy drinking, he meets a Huldra, daughter of the Mountain King. He considers turning into a troll himself to marry the Mountain King's daughter, but refuses to take an irrevocable step. Per remains human and builds a life for himself as a settler when a young girl named Solveig comes to the mountains to stay with them. Per is now so happy and confident in the future that he barely leaves the house he shares with Solveig. But while he is out to cut timber for the new house he is planning, he is overtaken by the past. The green-clad Huldra comes with a young troll whom she claims is Per's son. Instead of facing the possibility, Per flees. He then has life full of adventure, fortune, and loss. He ends up being crowned emperor of the world in an institution for the insane in Cairo. Finally, as an old man, Per sets out to return to Norway by ship. However, on the Norwegian coast, his ship sinks in a storm. At the end, Per fights a battle for his own soul and his growing self-awareness. Finally, Per is saved through Solveig's faithful love. So does anybody have anything they want to ask about what I just discussed about the trolls?
Let's say that one kid with the eating contest was kind of a badass. I had never considered trolls and Jotuns to be one and the same. That's the first I'd heard of that, so that was kind of interesting to hear about. It seemed like the general consensus. Now I can't talk. With trolls being more on the evil or bad side kind of deal. I always thought they were kind of like good and bad trolls. They were just more nature-esque, and then just wanted to mostly be left alone. Yeah, good stuff.
Anybody else have anything to add?
I've forgotten that I wasn't muted when I said I remember that story as a kid. I had a illustrated kids book with all those troll legends when I was like 7 years old, and I did not remember it until you told the stories tonight.
That's cool. Did anybody have anything they wanted to add about any of these things that y'all may know that I didn't talk about?
No, I really liked it. I liked the trolling a lot. Missed. Damn.
Of course, you had a lot more detail than the kids' book. It was cool.
Well, I finished it enough time. The next set that I'm working on with Amy is going to be fairies, the light and dark elves, and the 4 different types of mermaids. So,
The Huldra also tie into.
what's that?
The Huldra, they're in the trolls, but they're also in the fairies.
Yes.
We should make Amy teach one of those. Since she's doing a lot of the research and stuff, I mean, share what you find, I guess.
Well, if nobody has any questions or anything else to add, I mean, that's basically it for tonight.
I really liked it. Thank you, Nicole. That was awesome.
No problem.
Thoroughly
If there's anything like different you want me to do for next time, be sure to let me know. But that's it.
The only thing I could think is, I mean, with the troll one being so long, there was a couple different parts. It's like, ooh, say, remember to talk about this or remember to talk about that, but there wasn't much break, and then I was having to remember what I wanted to go for. But maybe just do breaks in case anybody went like between stories or descriptions or something if people want to go over. But I liked it. I'm excited for next time.
I have to look because I did see the term Holdra used for something else the other day too. I think I need to go back and refresh my memory because it's just a tickle.
Yeah. Amy is working on the fairies, and they're sometimes called the Holder folk as well.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. So y'all have fun and talk amongst yourselves.